Inside America's Boardrooms, the informational show for board members and corporate secretaries. Brought to you with knowledge partners NASDAQ, the Center for Audit Quality, and PwC. Along with content contributors Equilar, Meridian Compensation Partners, Wilson Sonsini Goodrich and Rosati, R.R. Donnelly, and the Society of Corporate Secretaries and Governance Professionals.
Hi, and welcome to another edition of Inside America's Boardrooms. My name is Ty Francis. I'm the Executive Vice President and Group Publisher of Ethisphere, and it's great to be back at the NASDAQ market site in Times Square, New York City today. So, as you can imagine, I'm in this seat again, so that means only one thing, that TK Kerstetter has moved over to the guest seat. So, to welcome my first and only guest today, and the usual host of Inside America's Boardrooms, TK Kerstetter.
Thanks, Ty. It's always a pleasure to have you back, although I understand we had a little trouble getting a hold of you and getting you slotted in here today.
It's a pretty busy time right now. I've just come back off a family vacation, well, a vacation you can take with 2 children. But it's a busy time for Ethisphere. We just released our 2017 Ethics Quotient and our world's most ethical company process. I leave for the Middle East on Saturday to do our inaugural Middle East Ethics Compliance Summit that we're partnering with Parsons Corporation. And then in November, we actually are in Tokyo doing another ethics forum looking at corporate culture. And we're doing that in partnership with AFLAC and our very good friends, the CAQ.
Well, I'm happy that you could squeeze us into that busy schedule.
Well, you know something, TK? When I heard the words Commonsense Corporate Governance Principles published, I knew you'd be calling me. I knew you couldn't resist to take a shot and give people a bit of an insight and your feedback to what those principles actually were. So, unless people have been living in a cave for the last couple of months, how about you give us the rundown on what these principles really are?
Well, a very impressive group got together and put together these common sense corporate governance principles. And I really don't have any insight into who started it, you know, how it came about, how the process actually worked. It's very interesting, the cast of characters, though, that ended up being a part of the group that did it. You have many of the institutional investors. You have the heads of BlackRock, Vanguard, T. Rowe Price, State Street. I mean, that's right there is a very impressive group and a large percentage of holders of public stocks all over the world. You've got heads of business. You got Immelt from GE. You got Diamond from JP Morgan. You've got Barra from General Motors. And then you have Warren Buffett. Okay, so plus they have activists from ValueAct. So it was a very interesting group that got together, and they wanted to take a look at creating some principles that would promote long-term investment for the benefit of retirees, for the benefit of American companies, for the benefit of investors, all of that looking, because there's so much noise, you know, everybody's not happy with how governance principles are being presented. So this group got together and said, okay, we're gonna put something down on paper that everybody can use if they want to. They put it out to the public. They looked at things like diverse boards, independence, short-term versus long-term, shareholder engagement. I mean, they really did cover the gamut. It's a very impressive piece that was done.
And I think no one should be surprised about this, because Jamie Dimon in his shareholder letters has been alluding to this for a while. Larry Fink has been very outspoken about this long-term strategy for governance. And, you know, working in London a lot, as Ethisphere does now, this looks a lot like the UK Corporate Governance Code. It's starting to take that format about this long-term sustainability strategy and more transparency with boards. So I've heard a couple of things from you, but what has been the response for companies themselves, investors, corporate governance experts?
Well, I was asked by C-Suite magazine to do an article on this. So
That's Equilar's magazine.
yes. Yeah. So it gave me a good reason to make some contacts. And the first person I called was Ken Birch from the Council of Institutional Investors. So he was pretty impressed that, again, the group got together, what they did, the issues they covered. He had some question about the dual ownership setup, but for the most part, he said this is pretty impressive that it's come out. What was interesting is the other person I contacted was Sean Quinn from the ISS. Now, ISS was not invited to the party, okay? Glass Lewis wasn't invited to the party. Those are two pretty influential proxy advisors that when you would do a corporate governance principles, it probably would be nice to have them included in the process just so that you could have the most diverse group possible. There was a note in the open letter that came out that said, hey, we can't invite everybody, whatever. But I thought that they were conspicuous by their absence. But
and in fairness, they did reply with a very high road letter.
Oh, the ISS took a very high road stance to this. And basically, they were very honest and candid in the sense that if everybody did follow these principles, that would be wonderful. Yeah. Okay, that would be great. I think they mentioned that it was something like a good beginning or a good start or something like that. They didn't choose to say why weren't we invited. They took a high road, but I think overall, everybody that I've seen commented on this feels that it's a very positive document. It creates conversation. And when you have this group, a group of this magnitude, paying attention to corporate governance, I think everybody's happy about that.
So you mentioned magnitude, this great group of people, Larry Fink, Warren Buffett, Jamie Dimon, Mary Barra. Great list of authors. So what have you taken exception to? There must be something in this principle that you have a specific feeling about.
Well, I don't take exception to anything, okay? Because first of all, I don't know, again, how the process went. I'm very impressed with how they could get this group together to do this. I'm in the camp that says any discussion on this is positive. I read it, as you would know, I read it very carefully because I was curious. There was only one thing that I raised a question about, okay? And that's only because I don't know the language. There was a phrase in there, and let me get this right, that board should have, it's about board evaluations, that board should have a robust process to evaluate themselves on a regular basis, led by the non-executive chair, lead independent director, or appropriate committee chair. The board should have the fortitude to replace ineffective directors. The word led was the only question that I would pose back to the committee, their group, because I would hate to see it facilitated, meaning I'd hate to see that a member of the board is actually the one that's soliciting the responses. Yes, they're going to have to sit down eventually with the results, but if they are part of the problem and they are soliciting other directors for feedback, they're not going to get independent feedback. And subsequently, maybe a best practice would be that every 2 or 3 years, there's an outside facilitator that helps, so that to make sure that you're having independent feedback on these board evaluations. Because again, if somebody is part of the problem and they're the ones soliciting for responses, you're just not going to get candid responses.
And it's a slight conflict of interest as well.
Yeah.
So they published this, a lot of comments, both from ISS and from the likes of you. So what's next?
Well, that's a great question because I'm not sure what's next. This is out there. They had a lot of buzz connected to what's happened, relative to the principles being put out. But we really we don't know what happens. I don't see the SEC doing anything. I don't see Congress doing anything. So what happens to it? So In a future show, we're going to have on Dan Gallagher, the former SEC commissioner. So I think he would be a great person to ask about this. But anyway, we'll have to wait and see.
Great. So, well, that's all the time we have for today, I'm afraid. This edition of Inside America's Boardrooms. It's been great to come back and get your insights, TK, on this corporate governance principles. So next week, TK will be back in this seat, as per normal, and to talk about some more boardroom topics. I've been Ty Francis, and this has been another edition of Inside America's Boardrooms. Thanks for joining us.
Join us again next week for Inside America's Boardrooms. Brought to you with Knowledge Partners, NASDAQ, the Center for Audit Quality, and PwC. Along with content contributors Equilar, Meridian Compensation Partners, Wilson Sonsini Goodrich and Rosati, R.R. Donnelly, and the Society of Corporate Secretaries and Governance Professionals.